Welcome back. And to continue with our discussion, I'd like to focus now on how do we bring about change. Now, change starts when we are dissatisfied. Contentment opposes changes. When people are happy, they want to keep things as they are. Weak organizations do not change. Strong organizations react quickly to change. Great organizations create change. Now, the pace of change is dynamic. Sometimes they can be glacial, which means very slow, or an avalanche, which means very quick. Slow changes outlive their purposes, and here's an example that may make you smile or laugh. The artillery example. Sometime back, the Queen of England observed an artillery demonstrations. And in the artillery, there are different soldiers and they all have different tasks. The Queen was very observant. There was one soldier who did not do anything. He was just standing at attention. So after the demonstration, during tea time, the Queen asked the captain of the artillery and said, "That was a very impressive demonstration, but I noticed there's one soldier who doesn't do anything." And the captain said, "Your Highness, he is soldier number 5. "Oh, okay. So what does soldier 5 do?" And the captain was very embarrassed. So that evening they went through the manuals, the history, and they found out soldier number 5 was the guy who used to hold the horses so they won't run away when the guns are being fired. We don't have horses anymore in our artillery units. Many years ago, priests and nuns were the habit. They look like shepherds. And the background of this is very interesting. In the Middle Ages, priests and nuns wore very expensive garments because they come from the elite class. And the Pope was not very happy. And he came up with an edict: "I would like priests and nuns to wear clothes like shepherds." And the shepherds wore something like the habit. And so they did. Over time, the dress of ordinary people changed, but the habit remained for a long, long time among priests and nuns. The person who does not make mistakes is unlikely to achieve anything. As Samuel Beckett said, fail, fail again, fail better. I don't know if you noticed, I deliberately misspelled the word person. And I will confess, in my life, I have committed so many mistakes and failed in my task. Now, change, or perhaps we should call it perceived loss, because change could be positive, is always met with resistance. Resistance to perceived loss is neither good nor bad. It's always a signal for further inquiry. So what is conflict? Conflict exists when we have incompatible behavior and incompatible interests. And the essence of social development is how to manage conflicts, not to resolve every single one. Many years ago, I became an Eisenhower Fellow, so it's a very interesting fellowship. There was no formal course of study, but I asked you to choose a topic, and then they arranged for one-on-one consultation with the best experts in that topic all over the US. And one thing that I learned is that we don't use the word conflict resolution anymore. We use conflict management, because there are some conflicts that cannot be resolved, but they can be managed. I was surprised to find out that moderate conflict is good. And it was interesting to see here that when conflict is high, production is low. That's to be expected. What I didn't expect is why. When conflict levels are low, production is also low. And it's highest when moderate conflict is good. Well, I began to understand moderate conflict increases productivity. Too little conflict minimizes learning and creativity. Everyone just say, yes, mom, yes, sir. But too much conflict wastes time and energy. The art of persuasion, communication, I was challenged to realize that communication models, consensus models, not conflict models. Because if I were a communication person, then my task is to persuade you to agree with me. But there's some conflicts where it's not clear what is right or wrong. One time in the Philippines, the government built a dam in the northern part of the country, in the mountains. The dam would provide electricity, irrigation, water supply, but it would also submerge villages, including their cemeteries. And the government asked the people to leave, and they fought back, even took up arms. So when they came to the communication school and asked us, help us, make them move. And I thought, who's right, who's wrong? If you put it to a vote, the people in the lowland would prevail because there are more of them. So there are times when it's not clear who is right or who is wrong. And we need to manage the conflict. There are many types of conflict situations. And I like this definition. Conflict means incompatible interests and incompatible behavior. So let's say that Henry and I, doing workshops all over the world, our interests compatible, behaviors compatible, no problem. No conflict. But then, maybe one night I didn't sleep well because of jet lag, and the following morning I snapped back at someone in the hotel. Now, that conflict is false because the interest still the same. The hotel staff wants to serve me, but I was just in a bad mood. 2, conflict means incompatible interests and incompatible behavior. But before tackling that, we need to tackle latent conflict. Suppose you were my superior. I want your job. But when you come to the office, I display compatible behavior. Ask if you want tea or coffee. And of course, I prepare it. I put my finger in the coffee and stir. So true conflict means incompatible interests and incompatible behavior. So there are many types of conflict in institutions. I like this greed very much, where you have self-interest, mission orientation, open-mindedness, and closed-mindedness. So there could be workers who are mission-oriented, but their minds are closed. I call them fanatics. And there may be people who are pursuing self-interest, and their minds are closed, and I call them bureaucrats. I did realize that in some countries the word bureaucrat is positive, but here I don't mean it in that way. And in many organizations, government agencies, there are people who pursue self-interest, but they're open-minded pursuing their self-interest. And I call them the opportunists. Or maybe this is really the root of corruption. Then you have mission orientation and open-mindedness, and I call them professionals. So the distribution of these 4 characters will determine the climate in that organization. So what are the basic approaches to management of conflicts? people don't know where to go, then we need vision, situation assessment, and strategy. We need to clarify values. We need to provide information and help people process or understand. What do we do? Communication, structural change, and sometimes change of actors. Now, Merck Vioxx paints a present discovered that consumption of their medicine led to high number of strokes and heart attacks after 18 months. Their value, patients first. They took up the drug in the market and forgo $2.5 billion in annual revenue. Pfizer, Celebrex COX-2 inhibitor, discovered that their medicine caused cardiovascular problems. Their value, shareholders first. They continued sales but added a black box warning that allowed patients and doctors to make fully informed decisions. Southwest Airlines, employees first policy. Treat employees well and they will treat passengers well. Employees first, customers second, and shareholders third. So in determining climate, we can ask ourselves, you want to be lion or fox? I think you understand what I'm saying. Yeah? Lions use brute force. Foxes are more cunning, smart, maybe devious, intelligent. Do you want to be a lion or fox? And here's a quote from Niccolo Machiavelli's The Prince. A prince must imitate the fox and the lion, for the lion cannot protect himself from traps, and the fox cannot defend himself from wolves. One must therefore be a fox to recognize traps, and a lion to frighten wolves. Those that wish to be only lions do not understand this. And again, this brings up the question of agility. He also pointed out, I think it was Alexander the Great, who pointed out, I'm more afraid of an army of sheep led by a lion than an army of lions led by sheep. So the point in our discussion, the behavior did not change, no learning took place. We need to be mindful of that. I was learning fencing. The rule was extend your arm first before your leg. And we have drills in every session. Extend, lunge, extend, lunge. But when asked to do it, deep inside us, we know that our legs are longer and we lunge first. So structure influences behavior. When put in the same structure, people from different classes behave the same way. Now, don't confuse this with the analogy I made earlier, which is the DNA double helix to understand social movements. And we said that in social movements, we don't want soldiers to mark people, our followers, to march in lockstep. We want them to think of themselves as an orchestra with different talents and instruments. And we need to understand that in a dynamic system, there are no side effects. We need to work with harmony. Now, here is an interesting video clip, which I hope you will enjoy. Eric Whittaker.
This is Evangelina Etienne.
Created a virtual choir.
From Massachusetts by the virtual choir. chosen a few of them here. My sister and I used to sing in choirs together constantly. Now she's an airman in the Air Force, constantly traveling. It's so wonderful to sing together again. I love the idea that she's singing with her sister. Aside from the beautiful music, it's great just to know I'm part of a worldwide community of people I never met before, but who are connected anyway. And this is Sleep, the virtual choir. Their experience singing it. I've just chosen a few of them here. My sister and I used to sing in choirs together constantly. Now she's an airman in the Air Force, constantly traveling. It's so wonderful to sing together again. I love the idea that she's singing with her sister. Aside from the beautiful virtual choir.
This is a 4,000 voice band. Well, to me, that's the most interesting experience in the sense that here's a gentleman who created initially a 2,000 voice choir and then followed it with a 4,000 voice choir composed of people from different countries in the world, some who are in conflict with other countries who are members of that choir. It's amazing what technology can do, but to me, the challenge was how did he achieve that coordination and specialization? And that is the main task of a leader manager. The strategic challenge, how to balance specialization and coordination. So coordination, the first fax machine represented millions of dollars of research. The first fax machine that rolled up the production line. But the value is zero. Why? To whom will you send a fax? You're the first fax machine. So the second fax machine immediately gave the first value. Today, to buy a $30 fax machine is not buying hardware. You're buying a network that can communicate with one another all over the world. Now, in coordination, we usually face the challenges of power. And here, John Kenneth Galbraith wrote, the former ambassador of the U.S. to India, he's a well-known economist, wrote a classic book on power, where he said, power comes from physical strength, charisma, wealth, and network. And he said, a good example of this physical strength, Mao Zedong said, power comes from the barrel of a gun. Charisma. You may or may not agree with the gentleman showed here. Well, I think people will say he's charismatic. There was a time when wealth was the basis of power. But John Kenneth Galbraith argued this is no longer the basis of power today. Because the president of a multinational corporation, when he retires, keeps his money. But he loses his power. And what did he lose? He lost the network. Networks, networks, networks. So today, we can look at different types of networks. There's the broadcast network, where you may have a television station or radio. And in this broadcast network, the value of a broadcast network increase with the number of members. The more listeners, the stronger your power is. But there is even a more powerful network today, peer-to-peer. Your cell phones. During the Arab Spring many years ago, at the time President Mubarak tried to shut down the internet, because it was being used by the protest movement, he was shocked to find out there was no switch to shut down the internet. And people continued communicating with one another through cell phone. Now, Metcalfe, a mathematician, said the value of a peer-to-peer network is equal to the square of the number of users, even more powerful than broadcast. But there's a third type of network, which is the network of social groups, where you can imagine you don't need to reach everyone. You just need to reach an influential member of a social group who will share the information with others. So Reed's law, another mathematician, said the value of networks can scale exponentially with social groups. Communication, we have what we call the strength of weak ties. And this is an interesting hypothesis that members in the periphery who are not close to the leaders often become the connection to other networks with other weak ties, because the leaders of a network don't usually communicate with leaders of other networks, but their members in the periphery do so. So there's the hub as well. There are some persons that are so sociable and they become a center of a network. They start rumors and misinformation, or give out good information. I would add to this expert power, arising from expertise, knowledge, skills, and craftsmanship. Now, let's take another break, and I hope you can stretch out and relax a little.